Hello, my name is Andrew Perkins and welcome to part 4 of my Laravel tutorial. In this video we're going to learn more about Laravel's views and the Blade templating engine and how to create layouts in Laravel. So let's switch to our text editor here, and if we look under the views folder you'll notice we have our authors view called index.php, and if you look under the home view folder, you'll see that we have one called index.blade.php. Now this view is being used to render the home page that you see when you first install your application. This is the index.blade.php file. Now .blade is referring to Laravel's Blade templating engine, and what this allows you to do is, instead of having to use PHP tags and echo, it gives you a whole bunch of other functionality as well. I'm just simplifying it here to give you a brief overview. And then you can run your PHP code and it looks much cleaner inside of your view files. So you don't have to use the Blade templating engine. You can just go about creating your views just as we did in the last video, just a regular PHP file and using PHP. Or if you'd like, you can use Blade. So I'm going to show you a little more about Blade and what you can do with it, and then you can make your own decision as to whether or not you want to use Blade or just regular PHP. So to get started, we're just going to rename this file, and we need to add the .blade extension here. So it's index.blade.php. There we go. And so inside, instead of using echo and the PHP tags, we can exchange these out, and you just use this double curly bracket syntax instead, and you don't even need to use semicolons anymore. So this actually makes it quite a bit quicker in writing your PHP and your views, as long as you're not having to exchange them out like this, since what I'm doing here is kind of slow. But as you're defining everything in your view, this is a much quicker way of writing your PHP. So we'll get rid of all the semicolons and get rid of the PHP tags. Oops. There we go. And so you can see this is just going to echo out these variables, and it's a lot cleaner looking inside of your view. So we'll go back to the browser and let's go back to authors, and you can see it still works. So there's a lot more to Blade than just using these curly brackets to output your variables. You can also use Blade for your control structures, such as if-else, and for your loops. So as an example, if you wanted to do an if-else, you could, instead of writing something like PHP if is set name, and then you'd have to open up your PHP tags again and end the if and then do what you wanted to do. Instead of doing that, you can save yourself a couple of characters having to type by using @if, and then you can do your is set to check if the name variable is there, and you could do @else and say no name given, and then @end if, and you could indent in here if you wanted to make it a little more readable. And we could save this and go to our browser. If we refresh, you can see it still displays it because it is set. If we want to check the else, we'll just go into our authors controller and we'll remove this name variable real quick just to test out the else part. Save the controller, and so it should say no name given. And if we refresh, it says no name given. Let's undo this change that we did in the controller so we have the name again. In addition to doing if-else, you can also do loops. So if, for instance, you had an array that you wanted to loop over, you could do for each and your array as like an element, and then you would output something to do with that element here, and then you could end the for each loop like so. So I encourage you to look at the Blade documentation for everything that you can do with Blade. There's quite a bit to it. It's very useful. It definitely can speed up the amount of time that it takes to code out your views while writing PHP. So I'm just going to remove that loop since we don't have an array to loop through. And let's make sure we didn't break anything. There we go, it's working again. So now let's move on to creating layouts. If we look at our application and we check out the source code, we can see that it's not using any layout. It's just using whatever code or HTML was in our view file. There's no doc type, no HTML structure at all. So we're going to change that. We're going to go back into our text editor, and there's a couple of ways you can create layouts. I'm going to show you two methods to creating layouts. The first way is to use Blade's sections. So what we need to do is, inside of this view file, we just need to tell it what layout file we're going to use. And you can do that by saying @layout and then just pass in a string of where the layout is located. So we're going to put our layout inside of a folder called layouts, and we'll call the layout default. There we go. And then we just need to wrap all of this content into a section, a Blade section, and then inside of our layout we can tell the layout to output anything that is in that section. So it'll make more sense once we see it here. So we're going to use @section to create a section called content, and then down here we'll want to end that section, and then we can indent this a little bit if we want to make it look cleaner. There we go. So now let's go create this layouts directory and the default layout file. So under views, let's create a new folder called layouts, and in that layouts folder we'll create a new file, and I'm going to save it as default, and we're going to use Blade, so .blade.php, and this is going to be our layout file. So you can put like a doc type in here, HTML, and give us some HTML structure, and we can have a title, so we can say authors and books. And so now we just need to get our layout to display whatever is inside of this section, and to do that we just tell it to @yield content. And so now any view that uses this layout and has a content section, its code is going to be output right here on this yield call. So let's test this out. We'll go to our browser and we'll refresh the page, and we can see now that we have a title up here, so it looks like it's working. If we look at the source, we can see that it has inserted our view right in between the two body tags, and it's using our layout. So we can also give our title, we can make our title dynamic rather than it being hard-coded into the layout file. We could do that by, let's just pull this out of here, so I'm going to cut it, and we can use the Blade curly brackets and echo out a variable called title, and then we can just pass the title in through our controller or from our controller. So I'll use the view here to create a variable, called title, and I'll paste in the name of our title. So now in the view we'll have access to this title variable, and it'll be authors and books for this specific action. So let's change it real quick so we know it's coming from the controller. So that's authors and books, we'll say from controller. So if we go to the browser and refresh, we can see it's kind of displaying it. There it is, authors and books from controller. You can see it in the source code here. Alright, so that's one way of creating your layouts. I'm going to show you another method of doing it. Some people don't like this method. I think it's pretty convenient. You can just tell your view file which layout you want to use and create a section, and then have your layout file yield that section. Some might find it a pain to always have to create these sections inside of their views, so I'm going to give you an alternative on how you can create your layouts. This time around we need to go into our controller, and we can set a public property up here called layout, and set this equal to the location of the layout that we want to use. So it'll be layouts.default, just like before, and save this. And now inside of the action itself, rather than returning the view, we can use this layout, which is the layout property that we defined up here, and then similarly to how we created this location variable and how that became available in our view, we can do the same thing. We can create a variable called content for example. You could name your variable whatever you wanted, and this variable will be available inside of your layout file. And then you just set that equal to your view, and your view will be rendered inside of your layout if you echo out this content variable. So we can change the title, and instead of using view, we're going to use this layout title. So we've created the layout property, we've attached our view to the content variable of the layout, so we just need to go into our layout file, and instead of yielding out a section, we're just going to echo out that content variable. And then inside of our views, we don't need to use a section anymore, so we can remove the section. We don't even need to use the layout call up there to tell it which layout to use, because inside of our controller we already defined which layout we're using. So we can just leave our views like this, and we can go to the browser and we can refresh, and you can see it's working as normal, and we have our layout here and our controllers being our titles being passed in from the controller. So that's two ways of creating your layouts. You can pick whichever one you like. I like both of them. I find this one pretty convenient because you don't have to use sections, but using Blade's sections approach to your layouts, if you have a pretty complex website, might be pretty helpful as well. So you can choose whichever one you want. Both ways are pretty good. So there's how to work with your views a little more, an intro to the Blade templating engine, and how to create your layouts. So I hope you found this useful, and thank you for watching.